So last week, Elden Ring Shadow of the Earth Tree dropped. And a lot of people thought the game or the DLC was really hard. They thought it was unfair and that this is way harder than what people expected it to be. And at the time, I was going to make a video about my thoughts on the DLC and how I thought it was, but I didn't finish the DLC at that time. So I decided, you know what? I'm going to wait and finish the DLC, finish all the bosses, and see if this DLC is as hard or unfair as other people have been saying. So after finishing the DLC, what are my thoughts? Well, I absolutely love this DLC. I really enjoyed all the new additions they added, like the bosses, armor, weapons they added to the game. I'm not going to really spoil anything. I'm just going to keep it like spoiler free as much as possible. But overall, I really enjoyed this DLC. And so here's the next question about it. Was it super hard and was it unfair? Personally, I don't think the DLC was unfair. I agree it was a hard DLC, but here's the thing with From Software DLCs. In my opinion, they've always been harder than the base game. Bloodborne's DLC was harder than the main game. Dark Souls 3 DLC was harder than the main game, and I believe Dark Souls 1's DLC was harder than the main game. So I expected this to be the case, you know? I expected the DLC for Shadow of the Earth Tree to be harder than the base game. And I feel like, yeah, they did. It was harder than the base game. But it wasn't unfair. Because here's the thing in the DLCs, there are items in the DLC itself, specific to that DLC, that boost your stats and lets you like fight, have an easier chance. Well, maybe not easier, but a better chance at fighting these bosses, right? And I feel like people weren't really engaging with this. They thought that, oh, my over leveled character would just go in and one shot everything and absolutely run through this DLC. You know, they were surprised when they found out that wasn't the case. That the DLC actually forces you to get good. And I feel like a lot of people had trouble accepting that their characters, that their over leveled character that carried them through the base game wasn't good enough for the DLC, and that they thought, you know what, this is unfair. I should be just absolutely destroying these bosses, and my level 200 character should be just absolutely like destroying this DLC, absolutely like destroying all the bosses, everything the DLC. It should be a cakewalk or a piece of cake. But no, that's not the case. The From Software made sure that it wasn't going to be too easy. That you weren't going to have this easy chance of just beating through the DLC and finishing everything in like an hour. No, they wanted you to take your time with the DLC, explore, find the items you need to help you get through the bosses. Because the bosses are tough. I think the bosses in the DLC are harder than the base game. But like I said, that was the case with all the From Software DLCs. And I didn't think, to be honest, that it was that much harder than the base game. Yes, it was harder, but I don't think it was to the point where it felt unfair. I felt the DLC was very fair. They told you, okay, here's what you can do to make you stronger. And use this, and you'll have a better time. And that's what I did. I got the items that helps you do well in the DLC, you know? And I felt like my character was getting stronger, you know, even though he was already my character was already super high leveled, where to the point where yeah, I would in the base game my character would like absolutely destroy through some of the bosses, but in the DLC I got to see this gradual increase of strength to my character, where the new items in the game actually made a difference in terms of defeating the bosses and going through the game or going through the DLC in itself. And a lot of the new items they add in the DLC really does help out in the DLC. Like there's are a lot of items in the DLC if you go out looking for will make your character much stronger than what they were before. And just overall, I really liked a lot of the bosses I liked most of the bosses in the DLCs. They were really cool. Like their designs were really cool. Their boss fights were fun and challenging. And a lot of times, you would go in. I didn't feel like there was something that was super unfair. I felt like all these bosses you were able to learn. You were able to find out how to dodge their attacks, what to do in this instance, where if I'm supposed to roll forward or backwards, or if I can parry this boss or not. And I felt like overall I had a great time with this DLC and I thoroughly enjoyed it. If you are having trouble with the DLC, I recommend check if you're actually using the items that the DLC is giving you, if you're actually leveling up your characters the right way, if you're using the items to level up, and that you're actually just engaging with the system. Because once you do, then the DLC becomes a lot more manageable. The DLC becomes a lot more just not super brutal. It's still gonna be really hard because it's a From Software game and a From Software DLC to be in that. But to be honest, it's still really fun. Like, come on, guys, this is From Software games. Were you guys really expecting this to be easy? Were you expecting this to be a cakewalk? Especially for a DLC for a game that came out over 2 years ago. You think that From Software will just let you just absolutely destroy the DLC in your first playthrough? No. Of course they're going to give you a challenge. And that challenge was given in Shadow of the Earth Tree. I'll talk to you guys later. See ya.